You are listening to the Film Festival Secrets podcast. My name is Chris Holland, and joining me today is Charles Judson of the Atlanta Film Festival. Hey, Charles.
Hello.
So, what's going on?
In the middle of submissions and programming for the 2013 Atlanta Film Festival.
And so, programming, that's your job.
Yes.
And what does that mean?
It pretty much means both managing the logistical side of the submission process of things coming in, but more importantly, managing our screeners and my fellow programmers to narrow down all our submissions to the selections for next year and trying to figure out the things that we can do and attach to some of the films we have coming in and trying to find those films that kind of make the festival, the opening and closing night films, and trying to make sure we achieve our mission of both giving audiences a really great festival, but also being a showcase for filmmakers on the festival circuit.
How long's the festival been around?
Next year will be our 37th festival.
Wow. I didn't realize it was quite that old. It was, okay, the 80s, yeah, no.
Yeah.
I guess the 80s are longer ago than I remember.
Yeah.
Or it feels like to me. Anyway, so you guys end up with a few thousand movie watchers who come and see your movies. Mm-hmm. How many films do you generally get submitted to you?
It's actually been growing. For a while, they were around about 1,800. Then last year, it grew to 2,300. And this year, we're on track to hit by about 2,600. So, yeah, I don't know where that's going to top out right now.
Okay.
So 2,000 plus.
But you've got to get them all watched.
Yes. Yeah.
What's the breakdown there? Is it mostly shorts, mostly features?
It is a huge chunk of our shorts, especially narrative shorts, because we are an Oscar qualifying festival. So I would say probably 50 to 60% of those are going to be shorts.
To explain what that means, Oscar qualifying.
There's a couple of festivals and a couple of events, but mostly festivals around the world. And there's about 24 plus in the United States that if a short plays that festival and wins their competition, it qualifies them to be on the Oscar shortlist. It doesn't mean that they actually get nominated. Most people don't realize you have to submit, and then you submit a narrative short or an animated short, and then from that they pare it down to the short list, and then from the short list they actually pick the 3 to 5 films that are actually going to compete for the Oscar. And so there's quite a few festivals. There's some that a lot of people know about, like the obvious ones, like Sundance and South by Southwest. But there's a lot of real great festivals around the country, like Cleveland and other places that are also Oscar qualifying.
So as a filmmaker, the point of submitting to an Oscar qualifying fest is to hopefully buoy your chances of getting some recognition.
Yes, it is definitely a good shot. I know for us, 2001, we played the Accountant. It qualified here and actually won the short Oscar.
Cool. And
we actually qualified, I think, in the last, at least since I've been here. I know since I'm going on year 6. I think we've qualified 4 or 5 films for the short lists that actually have made it.
Then went and got nominated, and or won.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Right on. So, what is your typical day like at this point? Is it a lot of movie watching, or you're getting pretty close to your deadline? So
yeah, we're getting close to our December 7th deadline. Right now, it's really starting to start to pare down and see what our festival possibly looks like. One of the things we do for shorts is we always program thematically. So it's starting to kind of see what themes we're kind of see show up. Also trying to see what niches we might be missing. Because you're relying on submissions, and when you get 2,600, you're going to get a good swath. But at the same time, there's always going to be places where you're going to be still lacking. One of the hardest parts of programming is, we always want to program more features that are directed by women. Like we're going to always get tons of shorts. That's no problem. Doc features, but narrative features, that's one of those kind of hard. It's hard to fill that out. And as a festival that was started by an organization that was meant to support filmmakers. That's always a big part of the mission. So that's kind of what I'm going into now, is starting to look and see what our festival look like and what's the possibility. Because we're going to essentially take 2,600 films, pare that down to about 400 or 500 that are like the real like in contention films, and then from that boil that down to 150 to 200 films that are going to be the festival. And, kind of have to start looking at that now. And we're now starting to reach the point where we're going to slowly, we've changed it up a little bit this year. Usually we always used to invite all our films at once. Now we're going to go to, this year, starting to go to a model, we're going to start inviting films, a couple at a time, and work our way through into December, both to kind of help us, mainly just logistically on our back end. That trying to manage that many filmmakers all at once is always kind of difficult with all the back and forth, and this way we can kind of work our way through and not make it so difficult.
Gotcha. That's interesting, that breakdown of women filmmakers. That plenty of women are making documentaries at feature length. Plenty of them are making shorts, but they, for some reason, don't always get up to the level of narrative feature. And I don't think that's something a lot of people are aware of. I guess I'd have to talk to a bunch of women directors to try and figure out why that happens. I mean, do you have any insight into that?
A couple. I would say one is just the easiest is the money situation, because for docs, it's much, much easier to get grants and to find funding for docs. Mm-hmm. It's also, docs are in some ways a little bit easier to get started, compared to, and to actually at some point probably complete, compared to narrative features. I also think there's, but I'd also say I think there's also a little more natural overlay with like other nonprofits, because a lot of people kind of work in these special interests, and I think that makes a big difference. But I would say one of the biggest influences to me that I've kind of seen just from looking at Atlanta and looking at other cities is I just think it's just when people start sooner. I think I've seen almost all the male directors I know who really are really good all started when they were like 12 and 13, whereas picking up a camera and running around, whereas so many of the different programs we've been involved with over the last couple of years, like when we ever do like a women's directors program, I mean, the median age is almost like 40 plus, whereas opposed to if we did it for guys, it's probably going to be almost 10 to 15 years younger. And so I think one of the things that we've kind of noticed that we feel like to have to do a better job of encouraging young women, especially like who are under the age of 21, to really be interested in directing and consider directing. A lot of them, what they do is they go the actor, producer, director route, whereas most guys just go straight from I picked up a camera to I want to be a director. Most of them don't go the actor route. But it's amazing the number of women that's their route. You can even see the films that the last couple of years that have done very well. I'm sorry. Some of the films that have done very well the last 4 or 5 years, you'll notice how many, like, Sarah Polley and other people, like, they're all actresses that went into directing. Mm-hmm. Not a lot of them started directing, like, at the very beginning of their career. Yeah.
Well, and it's so unusual that, someone actually made a documentary about a young woman director. Did you see Zombie Girl when it played a few years back?
No, but I remember it, yeah.
Yeah, and Zombie Girl is a documentary about a 12, 13-year-old young woman in Austin, Texas, who makes a feature-length zombie movie. And she's actually, gone on to continue making movies. I think she's 18, 19 now, and made a feature called My Sucky Teen Romance, I think it was called.
Yeah.
Which got picked up for distribution, and she's doing, fundraising for her next feature. So, there are definitely those lone examples out there, but when it's so unusual that someone thinks this is a good documentary, fodder, okay. Well, given that we're, two dudes talking about women filmmakers, there's probably not much further we can go without getting too sexist about it. So,
pretty much.
Tell me about some of the niches and content areas where you can pack a theater? Like, what is special about Atlanta audiences? What do they come out to see?
Well, we're always good for like just the shorts blocks, especially when we I'm actually like bringing back one block this year for next year that we didn't do for 2012. It's the Other World section, which is just sci-fi and horror, and we've gotten really strong films. And this year it was kind of like wanted to focus on something else, and like the audience feedback from people was like incredible. That were like, "What happened to the Other World section? What that was one of my favorite." So bringing that back. We've always been known for a while as a good place for experimental film. So we're actually building that back up this year. There's a lot of groups in town that have been that we're working with. So that's actually a huge interest. But we're also just a very strong supporter of just genre films in general. So like horror films, we've always, long before I think a lot of other festivals were really starting to play it outside the Fantastic Fest and other places. I think we were one of the first mainstream festivals to really like champion and be interested in programming offbeat sci-fi and horror films. Those do really well here.
Yeah, you guys played Cabin in the Woods last year, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Cool.
How'd that do?
That did incredibly well.
I'm sure. And
it's always great to see so many people who've never been to a film festival before. That's one of the other reasons why we like playing genre films and playing films like that, because I think it helps us continue broadening the definition of film as opposed to having it exist in this kind of indie box, where people only see it as like, oh, it's this quirky. It's either a quirky comedy or it's a deep, heartfelt drama.
Right. It's hard to market those. I think filmmakers don't really think about that part of the selection process where here you are, you've got 10 films lined up in front of you and you can only pick one. Mm-hmm. And you love all of them, let's say, equally, right?
Yeah.
And now you've got to start thinking about, okay, well, which one will sell the most tickets? Which one has the audience already well-defined? They've already self-organized. I know that if I get the attention of one of these people, they're going to blast it out to their mailing list, and, that's going to be a snowball effect. And, horror and sci-fi fans pretty much, especially in Atlanta where you have Dragon Con, which is huge, right? I imagine one email out to the Dragon Con list that says, we're going to have Joss Whedon's latest movie, like you sold that out, right?
Yeah.
So if you're a filmmaker and you want to get selected for festivals, it's a really good idea to help festival programmers realize that you've identified that audience, that you can get people to turn out in their market for your film. This is a lot easier with things that have clearly defined documentaries are almost universally easier to market, at least in terms of finding the audience. Yeah. Now, not everybody wants to come out for a doc as opposed to a narrative, but it's a lot easier to figure out who the audience is for a documentary than for most mainstream narrative features. Yeah,
that is one of the things that we have to greatly keep in mind. It's also the other reason why we love those genres, though, is because also a lot of times those filmmakers are just having fun, and it comes across in their films. And when you're trying to create a film festival that has festival in the title, you're trying to give people like an awesome experience where you're going from movie to movie, and it doesn't mean every horror film is like it's a jokey joke horror film, or the same thing for sci-fi or the comedy, but it's just that when you can walk in and you feel like you're watching something that somebody really truly put their heart and soul in it in a way where you can connect with it, it makes a complete, and it's a huge impact on the perception of the festival when people walk away. And it's not just, I'm coming to eat my broccoli. I'm not just here to support indie film.
Right.
Because to be honest, I think that's my perspective is I'm not really interested in saving indie film or anything else. I mean, the only reason I got into this years ago is because I liked watching tons of movies. And for most people, that's what they are. They're not actually, the audience, to me, the audiences are not that radically different. The perception is an indie audience, is completely different from a mainstream audience. But, I mean, if you actually talk to most people, if you went to Sundance and saw films, you went to go see Avengers last year.
Right.
You know, you went to go see Dark Knight Rises. You're right now probably geeking out over Iron Man 3 when the trailer came out. There's not, to me, that radical of a difference, and the more we try to make that difference, I think the more it hurts. Not only it just hurts everyone personally.
Right.
No one wins.
Right. Yeah, there is. I'll agree. There's some perception that, you know, indie films are somehow snooty or haughty, or you have to be really smart to watch them, or whatever. But I think the fact that so many cool genre films are coming out of festivals is doing a lot to combat that.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that there are a lot of festivals. I mean, we talked about Fantastic Fest briefly a few minutes ago, but yeah, like, that's a festival that really is just a nonstop party that happens to be focused on, you know, movies.
Yeah.
One of the things that festivals are good at is focusing on films that, you know, have subtitles.
Yeah.
Like Fantastic Fest is not afraid of films with subtitles.
Yeah.
And so you get to see these incredibly cool, you know, mystery and crime thrillers and whatever else out of Denmark.
Yeah.
Or, you know, Norway or whatever. It's mind-blowing how good the movies are out there beyond, you know, just the English-speaking spectrum. And I hope you guys get a chance to, you know, to focus on some of those as well.
Yeah, because I use my sister, my mom as good examples, because they're the type of people where all the time they'll see something and it will be one of those type of films, and, you know, they saw it at home on like Netflix or something, and like, I saw this amazing film from blah blah blah, and it was like, I didn't think I could sit through it, and it was like, yeah, that's why I do this.
Yeah. So talk about some of the trends you see coming across the submissions. First, I want to talk about submissions formats.
Yeah.
You know, there's a big push from Without a Box, which is, of course, the, you know, giant submissions engine for practically every festival out there, except South by Southwest, I think, is one of the few big holdouts.
Yeah.
Without a Box wants you to digitize your movie and put it up online, and, you know, in their little curated system where only festival programmers can look at it, as opposed to putting a DVD in an envelope and sending it by mail. What are sort of the ratios there of digital to, and if you can break it down by short versus feature, that'd be great too.
I haven't really seen the short versus feature, but I do know, like, it's pretty, I think right now, the last time I looked, I would say it's probably about 40% of what we have is online. Maybe even, it might even be higher than that at this point, because that's actually was from me looking like a couple of weeks ago, a couple of months ago, and that's where we're trending. So I would say we're definitely probably almost, if not at half, we're pretty close to half and half with DVDs and online screeners.
Why do you think filmmakers would prefer to put a disc in an envelope? I mean, not being someone who's submitted a film to a festival recently, I would think, you know, online's easier. I don't have to put anything in the mail. It's cheaper. I mean, they do charge you a fee, but it's on par with, you know, it's less trouble. Why do people still send DVDs in?
A couple of main reasons. One is just still quality. I mean, not to badmouth Without a Box, but the quality is not as good as DVD. Or Blu-ray, which we actually ask people not to send Blu-rays just because a lot of our screeners don't actually have Blu-ray players. For a lot of us, we just like, there's no point in getting into a format that really is still iffy. Some filmmakers, it's, you know, it is definitely cheaper, especially for foreign filmmakers. You know, paying that $3 or whatever it is to upload is infinitely cheaper than trying to get a film sent from New Zealand or some other place where it's still gonna, you know, it's gonna cost them twice as much.
Right.
Or, you know, if you're coming from certain countries, you're not even sure your film is gonna get here. We probably get 4 or 5 emails, you know, every submission, and that's the ones we get. So we don't know which ones that we haven't got, where a film is stuck in customs somewhere, you know, and that's happened quite a few times. Or in some places where there's suddenly a civil war, which happened with one of the films this year, where one of the filmmakers, both the filmmaker and the company, emailed us and were like, "We're so sorry, you know, the film isn't. We're not going to be able to send whatever this package that we're supposed to send to you because there's basically
no mail service.
There's no mail service. Everything is shut down." So yeah, that's I would say that's the main that ease of use, being able to upload that and know it's there. I know for a lot of filmmakers, that's what they like.
Yeah. How is that as a viewing experience?
I definitely would say I would like the quality to be a little bit better, but at the same time, I like the fact that I pretty much don't have to lug a bunch of DVDs around. I can pretty much watch. I mean, I just have to be anywhere with a decent enough internet speeds, which means I can be watching films at a cafe. I can while watching it at home. I mean, pretty much anywhere I have a free moment, I can pull up my laptop and burn through them. It's much easier for us when we're trying to work with screeners, because we don't have to bring you don't have to worry about people coming in and dropping bringing DVDs in
right.
and dropping them out. And,
where by screeners you mean the people who are doing the watching, as opposed to the physical DVD itself.
Yeah, because the other thing is and I know that this will freak filmmakers out when they hear this, but there's a lot of times where screeners have all the best intentions in the world, but they have lives, and when your kid gets sick for 2 weeks, and it throws everything out of whack, and then you don't watch those DVDs, and they're just sitting there. We're trying to get them back because they need to be watched. It's it's just sitting there, and you're feeling bad for a filmmaker because they don't know that side, but you're man, we got to get these DVDs back. There's we're getting close. I mean, I will say 4 years ago. 4 years ago, we had one screener who literally brought his DVDs back the night me and the current programmer at the time, Dan, were making final selections. And so pretty much I was watching 10 DVDs till 3 o'clock in the morning because they had not been watched. And if I had not watched that, there is actually one doc short in that batch that actually got programmed into that year's festival. So online screeners, to me, that's one of the things that kind of helps a lot, is having that. It's also the fact that the DVDs still fail from time to time.
Yeah.
A lot of filmmakers are new, so even though uploading is very difficult, we still got a lot of films with the DVDs where they're not encoded properly, or there's nothing on there, or there is just basically just the data reference file. So if you're doing Final Cut Pro or something, it's just a file that references the data,
right?
But it's not the actual film.
Whoops.
Yeah.
What about content? Are you seeing any particular themes in the films that you're seeing, or subjects that are getting covered a lot?
There's one niche that's kind of coming up the last couple of years that I've kind of found interesting. We've been getting more and more of the disease docs. That's been
interesting, as in you're interested in them, or interesting as it's interesting that you're seeing more of them.
It's just interesting to see more of them. I would like to say I wish a lot of them were a lot stronger. I think a lot of them are too focused on the disease.
Describe what you mean by disease doc.
It all ranges from mental illness, so something specific, very specific mental illness, to physical disabilities, to elements that we all get, but people don't really sometimes know more about. An example, I'll just use myself as an example. I'm diabetic, so somebody would do a doc on diabetes. So something like that, and a lot of times it's more, people are trying to make them quirky. Some people are trying to make them quirky and funny. Some people are really trying to educate people about the impact these diseases have, but there's not really a story. That's the big problem with a lot of them. That they're, if you're interested in that, for me, yes, the diabetic, a couple of years ago, somebody showed me a diabetic doc. It wasn't one submitted for the festival. And I was, of course, interested because I'd just been diagnosed as diabetic. But, they asked me, if that was something I would have ever programmed to the festival. And I was like, no, because that's not... We're programming for a general audience. And so unless you already have an interest in that particular topic, if there's no character arc, if there's no story arc, if there's no... if it's not used as a lens, because I think there's sometimes what you can do is you can hyper-target something, but it becomes this lens that allows you to extrapolate out, and you think about other things, that how it relates to other parts of society, or how it relates to you. And then so yes, it may not be something you're familiar with, but the way the story is told, you're like, oh yeah, this is just like what my grandmother went through and how it impacted us. This is exactly what happened to my sister. It's not the exact same thing. So it's been very interesting to see that the rise of that, and I don't know if that's because we're living in a post-Komen, world where we've had so many different organizations that have been dedicated to highlighting diseases, and people are kind of seeing those and want to do it, apply it to the film world, or what. I do think in some ways for some of these, they probably better focused on not doing a doc and maybe trying to put that efforts elsewhere. Because like on the festival circuit, I'm not sure how far those films are going to ultimately travel beyond maybe a few niche festivals, which probably are the places where they already know, like you're going to reach audiences that are already pretty much already educated about this.
Well, I think in a lot of ways there are organizations out there who are producing these films, right? Mm-hmm. Like, let's put out a film, and that way we can draw more attention to our cause without really thinking what's required in making a good film, and not just an infomercial for, eczema or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
What are some of the weirder doc topics in the disease category? Like, are there any just super weird, and you're like, oh my god, I can't believe somebody made a film about that?
No, not really, because
work with me, Charles. Come on.
I'm trying to think of something. No, I mean, there's some ones, like some obscure ones, I'm trying not to say too much because I feel like I'm afraid I'll reveal too much about the films that we've been submitted to us this year, so I don't want to dump on them on a podcast. But yeah, there's
a topic. Come on.
Well, actually, this is one we've actually gotten multiple times. So this one I can actually mention. So like, we've actually the last 3 years have gotten multiple documentaries on dyslexia. And that's a topic that's been like, ever since the 80s, and when Theo and the Cosby Show got, it got national attention then. So, but yeah, that's one that kind of shows up over and over again, that one.
Dyslexia.
Yeah, dyslexia.
People really want to get the word out about dyslexia.
Yeah, and it's true, and it's very interesting because, I mean, almost every one of the docs always, highlights how many very famous people, past and present, have it, or it's like Albert Einstein and, Thomas Edison and, and all the current people. But once again, it's one of those topics where, it might work better probably as like 10, 15 minutes.
And not a 70, 80, 90 minutes.
Yeah, 70, 80 minutes. And it's also just because usually, once again, there are, like that episode of The Cosby Show works because we've watched Theo for several years. And the funny thing is, like, we've laughed at the fact that, before that, the first 3 or 4 seasons, he's like, his dad, the family's always been like, you need to do better, you need to be a better student, Theo. And then suddenly, in the 4th, 5th season, you realize the entire reason why he's a terrible student is because he's dyslexic. And I remember actually at the end where he gets excited about the fact that he now understands why he's a bad student. And I remember as watching it, how I actually was with him, excited that, yeah, you figured out what was wrong. Like, you've been laughing at him, but like, oh. And I think that's what, once again, that lesson you want filmmakers to take is like, I'm with that story when it happens because I know the background of that character. When you make the disease the character, like, that's kind of impersonal.
Yeah.
There's no what connection am I going to have with that particular disease?
Right.
It's not to downplay it, but it's basically like that disease of the week, from the old soap operas or something where, unless, knowing the only reason why you care is because, like, it's the person. Like, no, it doesn't care what they can make it the most radical disease ever for the character, that doesn't exist anywhere in the world. But you're in it. You're not cared about the truth or fiction, of it. You're just with the characters. And I think, you don't want to fictionalize a disease, but you still got to find some way to hook us and get us involved. Especially if you want to use it as something to make change. So I was interested a couple of weeks ago. I was reading online about nonprofit organizations, and they talked about the impact of when they showed a group of kids. To people that you think like, oh, if you show all these kids, like, who really need money, the more you show, the more the money will go up. And no, like, the money goes down that gets donated. But when they focus and make a program around one kid and don't worry about telling about the other maybe 200 kids they help, and they just tell the story of one kid, suddenly the donations go up by like 20-30% instead of dropping 20-30%.
Interesting. I guess that would explain the recent Night of Too Many Stars. Did you see that?
Yeah,
Comedy Central does their annual telethon, or whatever they want to call it, for autism.
Yeah.
And this year, very much so, instead of, toting out a bunch of kids, they focused on one kid who, was into music, and specifically into Katy Perry music. And, they had this tear-jerking video. I mean, like, I'm tearing up just, like, thinking about it. It was so incredibly manipulative. But it worked, right? That was the point. And then, they show how the program has helped her and how she's... And then, what do you know? Katy Perry's going to come sing a song with her. And, like, not a dry eye in the house or, in the viewing audience on TV. Just very masterfully done. And, of course, then you've got Jon Stewart on stage, can't finish what he's going to say because he has to turn around his back to the audience and shed a little tear. But, these are the things you have to think about. Yeah. Well, I will plug one disease-oriented doc that I know is coming out soon. It's called Dying to Do Letterman. And it's about a stand-up comedian, a professional working comedian who finds out, I believe it's liver cancer that he has. Mm-hmm. And they give him, 3 years to live or whatever. And his name is Steve Maison. And so Steve, rather than making this, about, hey, this is a funny guy who has cancer, he decides to take his, his dream, his lifelong dream of being on the Letterman show, and taking it from being like a 10-year plan to get on the show. Now he's got a deadline. He wants to do it in a year. And he wants to do it in a way that doesn't capitalize on the fact that, he has cancer. So it's a really, really interesting doc, done very well. I believe Oscilloscope has picked it up. Should be available on DVD and VOD before too long. Dying to Do Letterman. All right, well, Charles, thanks so much for hanging out with me today.
Thank you.
I recently moved from Austin back home to Atlanta, where I grew up, so I'm going to be much more involved with the Atlanta Film Festival coming up. Specifically, coming up December 9th or 8th? 8th. December 8th.
December 8th.
Saturday, December 8th.
Yes.
Go to AtlantaFilmFestival.com to read all about the Film Festival strategy class that I will be holding. It's actually a 3-part class. You can register for any one of the 3 parts. Teach you how to make sure your film is ready for the festival circuit, how to submit strategically to the right festivals for your film, and how to market your film at the festival once you get there. Again, AtlantaFilmFestival.com. Check it out. Hope to see you there. Charles, where can people reach you online? Are you on the Twitters or stuff like that?
I'm occasionally on the Twitters, but not as much anymore just because I'm so deep into the festival. Usually, if you just look me up on Facebook, I'm findable. Charles Judson. Charles at AtlantaFilmFestival.com. You can email me. Something new will be coming up soon, so hopefully I can announce that. But right now, that would be like, just email me, Charles at AtlantaFilmFestival.com. Best way to get to me.
Alrighty then. My name is Chris Holland. You can find me on Twitter as FF Secrets. And thanks for listening, guys.